All right, now a last one for this week on um, emerging adulthood. So this developmental stage was first proposed by Arnett in 2000. This was created to account for differences in how people answered the question, do you feel that you have reached adulthood, between 17 and 26. So there's a space in there, 18 to 25, where people answered quite differently than other age groups. And you can see in the graph here that there's a change in pattern as well as a proportion of folks that say yes versus yes and no or sort of, right? So this emerging adulthood was started out being a subjective category. So other people have argued that this emerging adulthood is different from adolescence and from adulthood. It is linked to this idea of a prolonged adolescence that Erikson talked about, as that maybe fitting into what Marcia talked about as moratorium, right? An extended period where we're not quite committed to any particular identity, but we're still exploring. Levinson in 1978 also discussed this as a novice phase. There's a lot of variability across folks that fit into this age group from 18 to 25. So this is mostly observed in industrialized countries. We see it related to the delay of marriage, and delay of taking on a stable career, needing more years to prepare for a stable career. More years of education, right? Education and training before you take on that stable career, and delay of parenting. So to say this is more true for industrialized countries than other countries or in other cultural communities, but this is also varies across socioeconomic status and cultural groups. So the thing that we used to call an adult was someone, as evidenced on that last slide, marriage, career, and kids, right? Delay of marriage, delay of career, delay of parenting. The extension of education fits right in with delay of career, right? Marriage, work, family. And now, if we ask emerging adults, what is it that makes you an adult? We have a couple different answers. So the ability to assume responsibility for yourself, taking responsibility for myself, my choices. Establishing an equal kind of relationship with parents. Again, this is more common in some cultural communities that this is the goal or even an option than it is in others. Financial independence, and deciding on their own values or beliefs separate from and not necessarily guided by parental influence. According to moms and dads of emerging adult young adults, for fathers, they rated accept responsibility for your actions as the most important. Avoid petty crimes, avoid drunk driving as important as well, and then being less self-centered. That was their kind of hierarchy of what makes you an adult, with accepts responsibility for your actions as the top. Mothers reported similarly, a similar list, except for avoid drunk driving and avoid petty crimes were switched. Again, from that same study, talking about the kinds of things, transitions, things that make you an adult, biological transitions, able to have kids physically, family capacities, I am otherwise able to sustain a family, fitting with norms for your society of what an adult does or looks like, role transitions, and relational maturity. So if you look at this on this last slide, biological transitions, family capacities. These are the ways that emerging adults rated these which one was most important to making you an adult. And the ratings for their parents differed dramatically. So again, adulthood used to be marriage, parenthood, and career, and now adulthood seems to be more about assuming responsibility for yourself, financial independence, and ability to make independent decisions about your life. So let's go into social roles a little bit, just because in talking about taking on the roles of adults, it's worth talking about what a social role is. These social roles are expected behaviors or attitudes that come with your position in society. Um, we have often thought about adulthood and looking at change and development across adulthood in terms of changing roles. So in early adulthood, taking on roles of spouse, partner, of parent, of employee, and then shedding those roles or getting rid of them as you go into later life. Other people have talked about this, and I think a more productive way, at least for some of these role transitions, as considering that roles are not entirely ever gained or lost, but that they change, right? So as I was talking about with adolescence in another of our videos, that some of the ways that parents and kids are going to negotiate um, who gets to make choices about what they do and what their limits are, what they're ready for in terms of responsibilities, um, has to do with the parents kind of letting go of some of the responsibility for that kid, letting the kid take it on themselves, let the kid do their own thing. And granting the kid that autonomy may threaten the parent's role as a parent. So there may be stepping back from or changing and how they see that role with their kid. Very different to be in a role of a parent of a teen than it is to be a parent of a toddler who is very obviously needing you and looking to you for security, looking to you for comfort, looking to you for food, looking to you for so much. Teens are too, but they're doing it in different ways, right? So if we think about role transitions, there's a parenting role, and we usually think of that as a singular parenting role. But I think that we can look helpfully at how it changes across life, as opposed to losing the role of parent. It's not like when your kids become adults, you are no longer a parent. It is just that you are a parent in different ways. And how we move across those transitions, what that transition into adulthood looks like for the emerging adults, is going to inform what they think adulthood means, and how their parents are understanding their new relationship, their new responsibility in the child's life as well. The other idea is, if we're focusing on transitions, it's clear that some transitions influence others. We'll talk about that a little bit in the next week when we talk about young adulthood and how parenting and partnership and uh, and uh, and work all kind of relate to one another in terms of roles. The other thing that is important to consider here is the difference between a social clock rather than a biological clock. So now that in talking about development in childhood, we really focus on the biological clock, what is normative at a given age. And now that we're in this emerging adulthood, which is a stage that may not be experienced by everybody across cultures and across socioeconomic statuses, we're really kind of focusing on the social clock, which is more about the social roles that you are inhabiting rather than any particular age. What is normal at 19? It depends. It depends what you're doing. It depends if you're in school. It depends if you're a parent. It depends, right? It depends on a whole bunch of stuff. It depends on if you're working. It depends on tons of things, right? So the clock is more a social clock in this case, if when we're talking about development, and this is going to continue to be the case, talking about social versus biological clocks across adult development. Okay, so the other thing is that emerging adulthood has been challenged as a stage because most of the other stages we agree that everybody goes through. Everyone does stages. So a third go to college. About 60% move out of their house. Many in emerging adulthood have kids. Many also work. So this is a rhetorical question. The field is still sussing it out and working with it in a lot of different ways. But what are the implications of a stage that not everyone participates in, right? If we're talking about Piaget's stages, everybody goes through those. They may go through them in a different time than Piaget argued they would, but we don't skip them. People can skip this one. What does that look like? What does that mean, right? So especially if we go back to some of the initial ways that stage theories are set up is that they build on each other, right? So what if you miss one? Does that mean that you're missing some of the building blocks? So this is an interesting stage. It's pretty well accepted now, been around for 20 years, but there are still questions about how those developmental trajectories look different if folks don't have this emerging adulthood stage. Okay, so again, thinking about the transition to adulthood, that is elongated by the fact that puberty is happening earlier and it's taking longer years of preparation to adopt adult roles. The question is, what might be a viable response, or how we might help adolescents or young adults navigate these difficult years where their roles are kind of in transition. As I believe I said the first week of class, one of the things that is true across lifespan development is that transitions are hard. Even good transitions are hard. So the change is difficult. So how do we help them bridge that gap, right? And one of the ways that people do it is have done it historically, is that communities have different rites of passage. These are culturally and historically situated. In Samoa, people used to get tattoos. Some still do with their family name, their family history. It says something about what their inheritance is from that family. Sweet 16 parties, quinceañeras. Again, this goes back to adolescence and puberty with ways that people mark entering into adulthood. Some of the social elements of that are they often include a separation from the rest of society, instruction by an elder, some transitional ceremony where people come back into the community with this new status, and then welcoming into the community with that status. In the US, our dates and our ages for these are all over the place. You can drive with a permit and somebody else in the car at 16 in most states. You can vote at 18. You can drink at 21. You can't usually rent a car in most places until you're 25. So there's all these different levels of what adult means, right? This picture is a woman having her teeth filed, which is part of the ceremony for coming of age in her culture. Some other aspects that we think of often in Western cultures, and this may not be continuous across other cultural groups, is some understanding of a social redefinition with adulthood, coming into adulthood, where you have a real or symbolic separation from your parents. There are differences between genders, so we're highlighting that they are able to become parents, right? That is, again, kind of grounded in a binary view of gender that is also heavily heterosexual, so that hopefully maybe going away, but that is part of what historically these coming of age ceremonies have looked at. The other parts is passing on of life lessons from a mentor. And this is one of the things that I worry about as missing from a lot of emerging adults or adolescents coming into adulthood. That the mentorship piece, historically, in coming of age practices has cultural communities have had, this is what it means to be an adult, right? That you get some instruction along those lines. And that's not very formalized in a lot of what we do in a lot of Western industrialized societies. All right, so that's what we've got for emerging adulthood. I will see you on the discussion board. I'll see you online.